Hi, I'm Irina. My sister looked me dead in the eye at our family BBQ and said, "We don't have space for you." So I left, quietly. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been planning my exit long before that day. The missing money, the fake invitations. They even took my name off my mother's care file, like I was never part of this family to begin with. What kind of family does that? And calls it love. Do you ever wonder what it feels like to be erased while you're still standing in the room? Because that's where my story begins. The sun was already high when I pulled into Verlena's driveway. Savannah summers have a way of clinging to your skin like a bad memory, and that afternoon was no exception. The front yard was dressed to impress. White tents, picnic tables, balloons in muted tones like someone had Googled modern Southern BBQ aesthetic. I parked behind a line of SUVs, slipped on my sandals, and reached across the passenger seat for the gift bag and casserole dish. The gift was simple, a silver chain with a tiny engraved tag that read, "To Mom, love always E." Nothing fancy, just something that said I still remembered who I was in this family, even if everyone else seemed to forget. I walked past groups of people chatting in clumps of lawn chairs. Most turned their heads politely. A few offered small waves, the kind you give to someone you're not sure you're supposed to be mad at. No one offered to help me carry the food. Inside the tent, Verlena was holding court like she always did. Her dress was too fitted for the weather, her makeup too heavy for a backyard, and her smile stretched wide enough to show every capped tooth. When she saw me, she tilted her head like she was trying to remember my name. "Oh," she said, pausing mid-sentence with her friends. "You came." I gave her a small nod and forced a smile. "Of course, it's Mom's birthday." She didn't respond, just turned back to her circle and resumed her story. Something about a client at the dental clinic she managed who refused to pay for veneers, but still wanted to look like Meghan Markle. I found a spot near the end of one table and set the casserole down. A few minutes later, I saw my mother, Dortha, being helped into a shaded area by Raymond. She looked thinner than the last time I saw her, frailer. Her cardigan hung off her shoulders like it belonged to someone else. When she looked in my direction, her face lit up, but then her eyes clouded over, unsure. "Hi, Mama," I said softly, stepping closer. "Happy birthday." She blinked, then nodded. "You look nice, sweetie." It was the kind of compliment you give a stranger. We sat for a few moments in awkward silence. I tried to ignore how no one else had joined us, how no one had even asked if I wanted a drink. Then it was time for cake. Everyone gathered around the table, phones out. Verlena stood beside Mom, beaming like she was accepting an award. Raymond held up a blue velvet box. "We wanted to give you something special," she said loudly, "from both of us." My heart stopped. She opened the box. The necklace I'd picked out was sitting right there, catching the light like it had no idea it had just been stolen. Verlena leaned down and clipped it around Mom's neck. "I saw it and just knew," she said. "Simple but elegant, right?" People nodded, clapped. Mom touched the charm and said, "So thoughtful of you, baby." I couldn't move. Not because of the theft, though that would have been enough, but because no one else flinched, no one else noticed. I stood there holding the gift bag, now embarrassingly empty, while someone passed me a paper plate with a slice of cake already melting. I didn't even taste it. Later, as people milled around eating and joking, I moved to the side, out of the sun. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to say anything at all. That's when it happened. Verlena walked up to me, her tone syrupy but sharp. "You really need to stop showing up like this, Irina," she said, loud enough for heads to turn. "Seriously, we don't have space for you, physically or otherwise." It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, like she was offering helpful advice, like she was doing me a favor. I heard someone near the grill mutter, "Damn." I looked at Ariel, my niece, who quickly looked away. I didn't defend myself. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my Tupperware, slid the empty gift bag inside, and walked to the end of the driveway. My heels sank into the soft grass with every step, but I didn't turn around. Not when the laughter returned behind me. Not when the wind shifted and I caught the scent of charcoal and coleslaw and betrayal. When I reached my car, I sat in the front seat for a long moment. I could feel the heat building inside the vehicle, pressing against my chest. Still, I didn't cry. Not then. Because crying implies surprise. And there was no part of me that was surprised. They'd been making space smaller and smaller for years. They just finally said it out loud. By the time I got home that night, the air inside my duplex was heavier than it had been when I left. I set my keys on the counter, took off my shoes, and didn't bother turning on the lights. I just sat there at the kitchen table, still in my dress, with the Tupperware and empty gift bag beside me like leftovers from a joke I didn't get. My phone buzzed twice. Promotional texts. Not one message from anyone in my family. Not a check-in. Not a "you okay?" No surprise there. I sat there long enough for the ice in my glass to melt, then disappear. My fingers kept tracing the edge of the placemat, over and over. What haunted me wasn't what Verlina said. It was the silence that followed. No one had stepped in. No one had said, "That's not fair," or even just, "Let her speak." That kind of silence isn't accidental. It's practiced. Polished. Later that night, after I'd finally forced myself to change and crawl under the sheets, I couldn't stop thinking about the envelope. The one that had come in the mail 2 weeks before, addressed to me, with the family BBQ info neatly typed out. I remembered how odd it looked, how sterile. No handwriting, just a return address from Raymond's dental office. The next morning, I dug it out of the kitchen drawer. The font was Times New Roman. The kind you'd use on an insurance form, not a birthday invitation. I flipped it over and noticed a faint imprint where a second sheet had once pressed against it, probably a printed stack. Something didn't sit right. I opened my laptop and searched through old emails. Buried beneath my inbox clutter was a forwarded message sent from Raymond's office assistant. Attached is the RSVP list for June 12th. Confirm receipt. No greeting. No signature. That invite was never sent by my mother, probably never even seen by her. So that was it. I'd been included because it looked better than not including me, a checkbox on someone's optics list. Family PR. I leaned back in my chair and let the realization settle. The room felt smaller than it had the night before, and colder. It wasn't the kind of exclusion you could write off as a misunderstanding. This had fingerprints. I texted Ariel. Me. Did they make a new family group chat? Ariel. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know they'd leave you out. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask her to. I stared at the screen for a while, thumb hovering over the keyboard, trying to find a response that didn't sound pathetic. I gave up and locked the phone instead. The thing about being pushed out isn't the fall. It's the sudden awareness of how long they'd been preparing the landing. Quiet changes to the guest list. Shifted seating at Thanksgiving. Jokes that made you laugh, and then wonder if you were the punchline. They were smart about it. Not cruel, just calculated. Later that afternoon, I played a voicemail from my mom. It had come in a week before the party, but I hadn't listened to it then. Her voice was careful, like she was choosing words from a pre-approved list. Hey baby, I know you're busy. The BBQ's happening this Saturday. Don't worry if you can't make it. I'm sure you've got a lot going on. That line. Don't worry if you can't make it. It sounded more like a door being closed quietly than a genuine invitation. I replayed it. Then I played it again. And again. By the fourth time, I caught the hesitation just before she said Saturday, like she was making sure to stick to the script. That's when it hit me. This hadn't been spontaneous. It wasn't Verlina having a meltdown or Raymond going off script. It had been organized, delegated, rehearsed. Even my mother had been given lines to read. I wasn't just excluded. I was being written out. No confrontation, no final word. Just a slow redacting of my place, until it looked like I'd never really been part of it to begin with. the kind of removal that doesn't make a sound. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, the same spot where I'd unpacked my disappointment the night before. Only this time, I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything: dates, conversations, moments I'd brushed off. The time Verlina changed the venue without telling me. The Christmas my name wasn't on the tag. The way Mom had stopped calling unless someone reminded her to. It wasn't for revenge. Not yet. It was for clarity. Because you can't fight fog until you name it. Sometimes people don't slam the door in your face. They just keep repainting the house until your key stops working. I didn't sleep much the next night. Not because I was upset. At least, not in the way people assume. But because my brain wouldn't stop scanning. Like when you leave a room and later wonder if the stove was still on. Except in this case, the stove was a decade of my life, and it wasn't heat I was worried about. It was erosion. Slow, quiet erasure. The kind you don't see until there's nothing left. By morning, I needed out of the house. I threw on jeans and a cotton shirt, grabbed my grocery list from the fridge, and headed to the local market near the old neighborhood. The place hadn't changed much. Same flickering overhead lights, same cracked tile near the freezer section. It smelled like lemon cleaner and wilted celery. I was halfway through the cereal aisle when I heard them. Two familiar voices, hushed but not careful. I heard she showed up uninvited, just walked in like she still belonged. Verlina said it was embarrassing, like full meltdown energy. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Cousins, maybe. Friends of Verlina's. People I'd handed casserole to at funerals and sent cards to when they had surgeries. Now I was a cautionary tale with a name they spoke like a punchline. I moved on, tossed a box of oatmeal into my cart, and headed toward the dairy section without making eye contact. No one followed. No one called my name. The silence behind me was louder than anything they could have said. Back home, I dropped my bag on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. I wasn't sure why, but something tugged at me. An old, stubborn reflex. I pulled up my personal finance tracker, the spreadsheet I'd built back when I was juggling night shifts and rent. Every expense, every wire transfer to Mom's account, documented. The last entry I remembered was from 6 months ago, a $300 transfer labeled medication refill. But when I checked the receiving account, something was off. The routing number didn't match the one I had saved. I logged into the bank portal, checked the last 5 transactions. Same pattern. Every payment I'd sent in the last year had been rerouted to a different account. Same bank. Same name on the recipient. But the cosigner? Raymond. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the name. He'd added himself to a new account under Mom's name and quietly switched all future transfers. I hadn't been sending money to her. I'd been subsidizing whatever they were doing behind my back. Wow, I whispered, not out of shock, but acknowledgement. I printed the records, labeled them, filed them in the red folder I'd started keeping in the bottom drawer of my desk. That folder was growing thicker by the day. As I was closing the laptop, my phone buzzed. A text from Ariel. Ariel, I think you should see this. Sorry in advance. There was a link to a video. I tapped it. A TikTok played. Low-res footage of me walking away from the BBQ. The audio was muted, but the caption was clear. Every family has that one aunt. 3,000 views. Nearly 200 comments. People laughing, saying things like, drama queen, always gotta make it about herself, probably bitter she didn't get the house. I didn't finish watching. I didn't click the comments. I didn't save the video. I just set the phone down. They weren't just taking my seat at the table. They were reshaping the whole narrative, telling a story where I was the unstable one, the attention seeker, the distant aunt who never really belonged but kept inserting herself anyway. They thought I'd scream, post some cryptic message, go begging for attention. Instead, I opened my drawer, pulled out a pen, and wrote the date on the back of the printouts. Cross-referenced the amounts. Added a note. Account routing switched without notice. Compare signatures later. Then I flipped to a new page in the folder and labeled it, public image. That's when I started printing screenshots. The post, the comments, the tags. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I logged out. And I made a promise to myself, not to strike back, not yet, but to prepare. Because they weren't afraid of me lashing out. They were afraid of me documenting everything they did and saying nothing. And I'd already started. The documents were stacked, labeled, and tucked neatly in the red folder by the time the sun had slipped below the blinds. I didn't feel better, just clearer. And clarity, I was learning, had a price. It didn't soothe, it carved. But it also lit up the dark corners. I was reheating leftover soup the next morning when my phone buzzed. It was Ariel. No emojis, no gifs, just a single message. You should know what they're saying. Beneath it, a screenshot. It was from the new family chat thread, the one I wasn't in. Verlena's name at the top. She's always been emotionally unstable. It's sad, really. She sends money just to buy Mom's affection, then acts like a victim when no one plays along. I didn't freeze this time. I didn't gasp. I exhaled slowly and read it again. They'd stopped being subtle. The next message was from one of my cousins. I've always felt like she used guilt to stay relevant. My stomach didn't drop. It tightened. Not out of pain, but recognition. They weren't just rewriting the present. They were digging into the past, chiseling new meaning into every act of care, every sacrifice I'd made with no fanfare. I closed the screenshot, stood quietly for a moment, then got dressed. I had somewhere I needed to go. The branch manager at the credit union downtown remembered me. I used to come in every other week when Mom had medical bills or needed prescriptions covered. The woman behind the desk smiled faintly when I asked to check my credit history. I told her I was thinking of applying for a small line of credit. Nothing major, just planning ahead in case I needed to relocate. She hesitated. Her eyes scanned the screen. Then she leaned in slightly and asked, "Do you mind stepping into my office for a moment?" That's never a good sign. Once the door closed behind me, she turned the monitor so I could see. There it was. A business loan. $14,000. Past due. Co-signed under my name and E.R. Carter. It had been linked to my mother's address, the same address where I'd sent holiday cards, monthly checks, even fresh towels when I thought she might be cold. My hand trembled slightly, not out of fear but calculation. Raymond's name wasn't on the screen, but the move had his fingerprints all over it. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I asked for a printout and took it home. I didn't call Verlena. I didn't call my mother. I called the fraud department. And then I sat down at my desk, opened the red folder, and added a new tab. Credit abuse. I logged each entry, noted dates, added screenshots of the loan approval notice that I had clearly never authorized. They hadn't just stolen money. They'd borrowed my name, bet on my silence, and lost. On the way back from the bank, I took the long route. Just instinct. The kind of drive you take when your head needs more time than your feet know what to do with. I ended up on Pinewood Drive before I realized where I was headed. The old house stood exactly as I remembered, but with subtle changes. New porch furniture, coordinated pillows and plastic lanterns. Someone had painted the door navy. A for sale sign peeked out from behind a bush, half covered with duct tape like they couldn't decide whether to commit to the lie or the sale. I parked across the street, stayed inside the car. No one came out. No one had to. It hit me all at once. That house had never been mine. Not in the way people think of home. I'd vacuumed its floors, fixed the leaky faucet, painted the back room when Mom had her knee replacement, but I had never been allowed to claim it. I was a steward, a placeholder, the quiet sister who helped, never the one who belonged. And now I was an obstacle, a line item to be cleared off the ledger. I rolled down the window, let the air in, and whispered to no one, "You already sold me out." Then I drove away, not looking back, because sometimes the deepest betrayals aren't loud or violent. They're procedural. A signature here, a silence there, a door that doesn't open when you knock. The house faded behind me, but the weight of it lingered like the smell of wet paint. Sharp, stubborn, clinging to my clothes long after I'd rolled up the windows and turned the corner. I didn't go straight home. I pulled into the library parking lot, sat there under the dappled shade of a maple tree, and stared at nothing for a while. Then, I drove to the storage facility off Highway 17, the one I hadn't visited since before Dad passed. It was still there, Unit 208. Same dull keypad, same dent in the corner of the roll-up door. I punched in the code and slid the latch open. The light flickered once before settling into a weak glow. Most of what was inside hadn't been touched in years. Boxes labeled in my father's handwriting, a lawn chair, 3 old toolboxes, and a rusted file cabinet. I knew exactly what I was looking for. The blue accordion folder sat behind the toolbox under a blanket no one had used since 2009. I recognized it immediately. Dad kept all important documents in that folder: wills, car titles, tax forms, a copy of Mom's medication schedule from when her memory had started to go soft around the edges. I brought it home, cleared the kitchen table, and began sorting. It didn't take long to find what I didn't know I needed. Tucked in between a copy of his last will and an envelope marked for E, in bold, heavy letters, was a deed. My name, Irina Ruth Carter, was listed clearly. Co-owner, but first on the title. Date of record, July 3rd, 2018. 5 years ago. I sat back in my chair. 5 years. 5 years of paying utilities, helping with repairs, bringing groceries after my shifts, and not once had anyone said, "Thank you for helping us keep the house." Because it wasn't us. It was me. I printed 2 copies, slid one into the red folder, and filed the other into a fireproof bag I kept under the bed. Then I opened the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, clean, steady. Dad's voice on paper. Irina, if you're reading this, something has shifted. Maybe it's your patients. Maybe it's their mask. Either way, I need you to remember. They push you out because you mirror what they try to bury. Don't let them tell the story without you. You've earned more than they'll ever admit. Don't hand over what you've built, not even out of love. I didn't cry. I folded the letter carefully and held it against my chest. It was the closest thing to protection I'd felt since the BBQ. By that afternoon, I'd drafted an email. No subject line, just one sentence. Just to confirm, I still co-own 438 Pinewood. All records are updated. I sent it to Verlina, Raymond, and a few others. Not in the group thread, of course. That ship had long sunk. I BCC'd Fallon, my lawyer. She'd been waiting for me to take this step. No threats, no accusations. Just notice. 3 hours passed. No one responded. But Verlina made a Facebook post that evening. Not directed at me, but I knew the tone. Some people will do anything to stay relevant, even rewrite history. I didn't reply. I didn't comment or screenshot it. I didn't send it to Ariel. Instead, I forwarded a message to my real estate contact. Please begin property valuation for 438 Pinewood, quietly. She wrote back 10 minutes later. Understood. No paper trail to family names. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was a low hum, the sound of a storm waiting for clearance. I didn't light a match. I'd simply placed the gasoline and stepped away. They thought my quiet meant weakness. They were about to learn what quiet could afford me. The next morning, I sat across from Fallon in her office downtown, hands folded neatly in my lap, while she flipped through the folder marked Keep. Her office was everything mine had never been. Quiet, orderly, untouched by grief or family noise. The smell of cedar polish hung in the air, interrupted only by the faint scratching of her pen as she annotated my documents. "You're not going to war," she finally said, her voice clipped but steady. "You're ending a farce." I nodded. That was all this had ever been. A performance. I just hadn't realized I was the only one who didn't know her lines had been cut. Fallon drafted a legal notice that afternoon. A formal request for review of the estate's assets and the property transfer history tied to 438 Pinewood. No fireworks, just a soft knock on the legal system's door. "You sure you want to move forward quietly?" she asked. "I've raised my voice before," I said. "They just talked louder." I left her office feeling more grounded than I had in weeks. On the drive back, I passed Rose Haven, where Mom was staying, and something pulled at me. Not guilt, not longing, just the kind of curiosity you get when you want to see for yourself what you already suspect. I pulled into the parking lot, waited a moment in the car, then went inside. The lobby smelled like lavender cleaner and something metallic. A nurse at the front desk greeted me with a practiced smile. "I'm here to visit Dorothy Carter," I said, already knowing. She tapped the keyboard, then paused. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not listed as an approved visitor." I blinked once. That must be a mistake. She tilted the screen slightly toward herself, voice still even. "The approved contacts were updated 3 weeks ago. It's restricted to her medical power of attorney, Verlena Carter." There it was, not a locked door, just one that had been relabeled from the inside. I nodded once and thanked her, then walked out slowly. On the way back to my car, I pulled the envelope with Dad's letter from the glove box. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I just held it in my palm like a weight, a reminder of everything they thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late. Back in the driver's seat, I called Fallon. "They took me off Mom's access," I said. "Add that to the list." Her pause was short, sharp. "You want to file now?" "Not yet," I said, "but soon." That evening, while the streetlights flickered on across Savannah and the air turned thick with humidity, I sat by the window in my apartment and read the text that had come in from Verlena. Verlena: "If you wanted to make a mess, congrats. Mom's upset. Hope that was worth it." No greeting, no sign-off, just passive-aggressive poison dressed up as concern. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I opened a new email to Fallon. Subject: Motion Prep Body. Request full audit of estate transfers, and begin quiet motion for restraining order, if needed. She replied in under 10 minutes. Fallon: "Understood. We'll proceed accordingly. Quiet filing. No notifications until court acceptance." I stared at the screen for a moment before closing the laptop. I poured myself a glass of water, sat back, and let the silence settle in the apartment. This kind of quiet wasn't loneliness. It was a kind of readiness. They'd always told me there wasn't space for me. So I made room. For the truth. For records. For consequences. And now they'd feel what it was like to lose their footing, one carefully logged line at a time. It started with a phone call. Late afternoon, sun slipping sideways through the blinds in my kitchen, casting long gold stripes across the floor. I was rinsing a mug when Fallon's name lit up my screen. "The review request got held up," she said without preamble. "Someone connected to the estate attorney placed a block on it. Quietly. Sloppy, but intentional." I leaned against the counter, drying my hands with a dish towel. "So, obstruction?" "Informal, for now," Fallon said. "But I've already flagged it with the Bar Association. We'll escalate if needed." I wasn't surprised, just annoyed that it took them this long to get brazen. I told her to set up a meeting with the ethics committee. No press, no public record yet. That night, I sat on the couch with my laptop open, catching up on local community board posts. That's when I saw it. Wade. His name wasn't tagged, but I recognized the profile picture, the same one he'd had since we broke up 3 years ago. His post was vague, calculated. There's always a reason people stop getting invited. Patterns don't lie. Dozens of mutual friends liked it. Some commented with the kind of laughing emojis that make it feel worse than a slap. Others asked for context. Wade didn't reply to anyone. I stared at the screen and felt nothing at first, just a strange buzzing under my ribs. Then my phone lit up. Ariel. "Mom told him things, twisted things. I'm sorry." I typed, deleted, retyped, settled on one word. Me. Noted. I didn't need to respond publicly. I didn't need to explain the time Wade showed up drunk to my dad's memorial, or how he'd called me a background character in my own life during our last fight. Verlina must have seen the opening and spoon-fed him enough fiction to spark a performance. And he gave them one. Right on cue. The next morning, I got up early. Not out of nerves, just clarity. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and started drafting a packet. No drama, no venom, just facts. A full timeline of the hours I spent caring for my parents, when I took time off work to take Mom to her neurologist, the receipts for prescriptions, the nights I slept on that awful pull-out couch after Dad's surgery. I compiled screenshots of my conversations with Verlina over the years, where she'd begged me to cover bills, where she promised we'd handle the paperwork together, where she laughed about how Mom didn't even remember what she signed. I printed it all. Then I sent the file to 3 people. First, Fallon. Second, the head of the local housing board, someone I knew from church, who'd once told me, "You never complain, and that's why we trust you." And third, the women's prayer group my mother used to attend, before Verlina took over her calendar. No captions, no disclaimers, just the truth. By noon, I'd received 2 replies. One from Fallon confirming the document would be included in the estate audit. The other from the housing board chair. "Thank you for trusting us. I had no idea." That evening, Fallon forwarded me a new piece of information. A leaked email from a junior paralegal at the estate firm. Raymond had transferred $5,000 to the estate attorney's personal account 2 months ago. The memo line read, "Consultation, Pinewood Asset Review." Fallon's note was short. "This is leverage. Do you want to act on it now?" I read the email twice. Then I wrote back, "Not yet, but I will. Just not how they expect." I wasn't ready to drop the curtain. Not while they were still mid-monologue, thinking I was seated in the audience with no lines left. Let them perform. Let them scramble. Because they'd forgotten something crucial. Unstable people don't keep records. But I did. By the time Saturday arrived, the air in Savannah had thickened with that swampy weight only locals can describe. The kind that sticks to your skin and settles in your bones. I woke up early, made a cup of black coffee, and stood in front of my closet longer than I should have, deciding between charcoal and navy. I went with gray. No makeup, no jewelry, just clean lines and silence. Let them wear their armor. I'd bring my facts. The town hall wasn't far, tucked between a small bakery and a hardware store, and when I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Verlina's Lexus already there. Front row, of course. It didn't surprise me. Inside, the HOA meeting had already started. Maybe 30 people sat in folding chairs arranged in rows, fanning themselves with paper agendas. A man in a polo shirt stood at the front, running through community items, landscaping budget, pest control schedule. It was almost easy to forget why I was there. Then my name was called. Not loudly, not with emphasis. Just a gentle, neutral prompt from the moderator. If there are any additional parties to the Pinewood Drive matter present, you're welcome to speak now. Verlina shifted in her seat but didn't turn. I stood. "I am," I said simply. A few heads turned. The sound in the room dropped half a note. Not silence, but close. I walked to the front, unfolded a single piece of paper from the file I brought. "My name is Irina Carter. I'm listed as a co-owner of 438 Pinewood. The name was recorded on July 3, 2018. I have the deed here. I also have a copy of our father's original will." I laid the documents gently on the table in front of the moderator. Then I read, "In recognition of her direct care and full financial support over the last decade, Irina Carter shall retain final authority in the disposition of the Pinewood property." A sharp inhale from the left side of the room. I didn't look to see who it was. I didn't pause for effect. I reached into my folder and pulled out the rest. Screenshots, transaction histories, emails from Verlina asking for help, begging me to cover repairs, to keep quiet about the shifting account names, records of medical supply orders billed to my credit card, photos of the home during stages of renovation. I'd painted the shutters myself. Then the last page, a screenshot from Facebook, dated the week after I was shut out of Mom's care file. Some people will do anything to stay relevant, even rewrite history. I didn't flinch. I looked up. My silence isn't guilt, I said. It's grief. It's the sound of someone who knew this moment would come and documented every step, so I wouldn't have to shout to be believed. No one clapped. Not yet. The moderator took a slow breath. Do any parties wish to contest this documentation? Verlina didn't move. I watched her closely. Her jaw tightened. She glanced down at her lap, adjusted her blazer, but didn't speak. Not a word. A neighbor in the back let out a soft, "Well, damn," and someone else stifled a cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. I didn't wait for the fallout. I gathered my folder, nodded to the moderator, and walked back down the aisle. Every step measured, not rushed. Outside, the sun was just starting to dip behind the roofline of the bakery next door. I reached my car, opened the door, and paused. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. I felt emptied. Like something I'd carried for far too long had finally been set down, but left an imprint on my hands. They asked for proof. I gave it to them, not to win, not to punish, but because no one should have the power to erase someone else just by talking louder. They demanded an explanation. I gave them records. For the version of me they tried to edit out of our family story. I left Savannah 2 months after the HOA meeting. No goodbye party, no send-off. Just a truck, a lease agreement, and enough silence between boxes to pack a decade of grief. Wilmington welcomed me with salt in the air and space in the sky. My new apartment wasn't large, just 2 rooms and a balcony that faced the ocean if I leaned far enough over the railing, but it felt earned. That first morning, I opened every window and let the wind sweep through. The walls didn't hold memories yet. That was a relief. I made coffee without pacing. I sat down without checking my phone. This time, the quiet wasn't strategy. It was mine. Volunteering at the clinic came naturally. The patients reminded me of my mother in ways that didn't hurt. Soft, forgetful, sometimes angry for no clear reason. I didn't flinch when they called me sweetheart or asked the same question 3 times in 10 minutes. It felt honest, human. I'd finish my shifts around 3, stop by the small market on the way home, and pick up whatever I needed to cook, just enough for one. No leftovers. No freezer meals labeled for someone who wouldn't be there. By the end of the 2nd week, I stopped waking up with my fists clenched. Then came the email from Ariel. Subject line: just in case you were wondering. It was short. Mom's still telling people you overreacted. But nobody's really buying it anymore. Ray's been quiet. They're renting now. Small place out near Mill Creek. I think they're tired. And scared. But they'd never admit it. No attachments. No dramatic revelations. Just honesty, typed in lowercase, like a whisper meant only for me. That same day, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, a photo. A baby girl, maybe a few weeks old, bundled in pink. Chubby cheeks, round, curious eyes. The back of the photo read, Emily, born August 3rd. Taped to it, a sticky note, You still matter. There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I didn't cry. I didn't shred it either. I placed the photo in the drawer beside my father's letter, the property deed, and a folded list of transactions I no longer needed to fight over. Some things don't require confrontation. Some truths don't need to be spoken aloud to be honored. That evening, I walked down to the pier. The air was cooler than expected, and I brought a sweater just in case. Couples passed by holding hands. A young man taught his daughter how to cast a fishing line. I leaned against the railing and watched the water move, forward and back, without ever asking for permission to exist. I took out my journal. I hadn't opened it since the last entry in Savannah. On the page I wrote, I'm not waiting for apologies. I'm not auditioning for forgiveness. I'm not proving anything anymore. I have space now, and it's mine. I sat there until the sun melted behind the edge of the water. No music, no texts, just the sound of my own breath, steady and unhurried. They said there was no space for me. But here, in the salt, heavy breeze, and the soft creak of the dock beneath my feet, I finally understood something simple. I never needed theirs. Sometimes, it takes being pushed out to finally realize you were never truly invited in. Looking back, I don't regret the silence I chose. I don't regret not yelling, not fighting at their level. What I do hold on to is that I didn't let their version of me be the final word. I documented, I remembered, and when the time came, I responded with proof, not pain. So here's what I've learned. Family is not built on obligation. It's built on respect. And if your seat at the table comes with conditions that erase your worth, maybe it's time to build your own table. If you're going through something similar, please hear me. You're not weak for walking away. You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to choose clarity over chaos. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt erased by the very people who were supposed to love you the most? Have you ever had to choose silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because it was the strongest thing you could do? Let me know in the comments. Drop a 1 if this story resonated with you. Tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Or if this story didn't sit right with you, I'd love to hear why. There's room for every perspective here. And if you're new here, or if you've been quietly watching for a while, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. We've got more real, raw, and deeply human tales coming your way. Because here, your story matters too. Thank you for listening.